Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's edition of the Games Okanda. I'm Marc Power. It's been requested a few times that I talk about this month's show, and it's a format that, in my opinion, never got its just due in the United States. Outside factors, network meddling, just never kind of cursed it, in a way. It had a decent run in Canada going for 3 years, but that was the longest it had. So if you're starting to add up the numbers here, you've probably figured out what I'm talking about. This month, we're going to be talking about the Bob Stewart classic, Jackpot.
Today, 16 players here are trying to win $50,000. Every one of them holds a different riddle, but only one of them holds the jackpot riddle. You never know when someone in the game will stand up and yell, Jackpot! Ladies and gentlemen, here's the star of our show, Jackpot!
For those of you who have been watching the last 4 shows, you know that this is our last show together with this group. I kind of view this with mixed emotions, sort of like watching my mother-in-law drive my new car over a cliff. No, I'm going to miss you guys. You guys are great. Okay, welcome to Jackpot.
Jackpot was a game of riddles that ran originally on NBC from 1974 to 1975. It was hosted by a game show legend in the late great Jeff Edwards, and his announcer, not only a game show legend, but a broadcasting legend in the late great Don Pardo. 16 players would play and would stay for the entire week. At the beginning of each game, one player is determined to be the expert, while the other 15 sit in the gallery. Before each game started, a target number is determined at random between 100 and 995. This is then multiplied by a random multiple between 5 and 50 in order to determine the value of the super jackpot. Which means that theoretically the super jackpot could be worth as much as $50,000, an unheard of sum of money for daytime television at the time. The game basically works as follows. The expert chooses a player from the gallery who reveals a dollar amount between $5 and $200 and then reads a riddle. If the expert can solve the riddle correctly, they remain in control. If they're wrong, then the player who stumped them takes over as the expert. Either way, the money gets added to the jackpot. This continues until the expert finds the player who has the jackpot riddle. They then have a choice. They can try to solve the jackpot riddle right then and there, and if they're right, then they and the player who was holding the jackpot riddle get to split that money. Or they can risk it by playing on and trying to build up the jackpot even further, knowing that if they miss just one riddle, they'll lose their position and be out of the money. And as I said, if the target number exactly matches the jackpot at any time, then the players are going for the super jackpot, which is usually a pretty difficult riddle. But if won, it could be worth up to $50,000. And there is one clip going around on the circuit that features a massive $38,750 win.
Well, Pen, there it is. This one riddle is worth $38,750. I'll read it, and I'll repeat it once, and you'll have 5 seconds. He's a carpenter, and I'm a shepherd. But we were both in the same line of work. What's our line?
Astronaut?
Right! For
Now this era of Jackpot actually did really well. It was doing a 50 share at one point, which is unheard of, and ratings were tremendous, and it seemed like it was going to be a long-running show. But for whatever reason, the vice president in charge of programming at NBC at the time, Lynn Boleyn, wasn't so sure, and held a focus group who decided essentially that it's not broke, so we have to fix it. And the orders came in from the network to get rid of the riddles, which Bob Stewart hated that idea. But Lynn said, well, get rid of the riddles or you don't have a show. So instead of riddles for the second season, we just had straightforward questions, either true, false, either or multiple choice. And even host Jeff Edwards hated it, but he wasn't allowed to question it as per the network, or he'd be out of a job. So basically the show fell completely flat. And as if dropping the one thing that made Jackpot really stand out, the riddles, the other thing that made it stand out was that huge $50,000 grand prize. Well, the network got rid of that too. And now the super jackpot was just a random number between $2,000 and $10,000. Now, $10,000 is still a lot of money in 1975, but to go from $50,000 all the way down to a max of $10,000, that's a big elephant in the room, and it's a massive middle finger at the viewers. You really think they're not going to notice that? So, way to go, NBC. You ruined a great show. Let's hear it for network executives. But despite that, Bob Stewart knew the format was solid and said, well, if NBC doesn't want it, maybe another network would. And in 1984, he decided to go ahead with a new pilot for a revival.
Ladies and gentlemen, one of these 15 players is holding a secret jackpot riddle that could be worth thousands of dollars. Who can it be? Well, at any moment, someone in the game is going to stand up and say, Jackpot! Now, here is the poet laureate of television, Nipsey Russell.
They just made a movie about a mermaid. I don't understand the reason why. It's not enough woman to make love to and too much fish to fry.
In 1984, Bob Stewart would produce a proposed revival for CBS of Jackpot. This time, the show would be hosted by the late great poet laureate of television himself, Nipsey Russell, along with the unmistakable voice of Johnny Gilbert as announcer. Now, this sounds like a combination that should be absolutely perfect on paper. The poet laureate of television hosting a show that's all about riddles and rhymes. But unfortunately, it just didn't really work. Nipsey is a great funny man, very witty, very clever, but he's not a good straight man, in my opinion. His hosting, it was awkward, and he seems a little ill at ease at times, which is surprising given what the nature of the show. Anyway, the game format itself, the basic idea stayed the same, with a now king or queen of the hill, a name that would remain for all versions of Jackpot from here on out, facing off against 15 players in the gallery, trying to find the jackpot riddle in the hopes of going for all the money in the jackpot. The biggest twist in this version, however, is that there was no longer a target number or super jackpot. Instead, the jackpot started at $150, and every riddle was worth a flat $150. Once a contestant found the jackpot riddle, they then had the option to either try and solve it right then and there and split it with the Riddler, or they could risk playing on, try to build up the jackpot, with each riddle now being worth double its value, or $300. So there's a little added incentive to keep going. Another twist was added in that if the jackpot riddle wasn't found until the very last player, a $5,000 bonus would be added to the jackpot. And in addition to that, once the jackpot was won, the two winners would then earn the right to play the new bonus round called Riddlegrams. Riddlegrams was essentially a rehash of Bob Stewart's other show, Shoot for the Stars. And it's a format he tried several times, and it never really took off. The two contestants work as a team, are given 60 seconds to try and solve 7 riddlegrams. A riddlegram being a proper name or everyday expression, but shown in other words or descriptions. For instance, the phrase pea soup would be shown as 16th letter broth. One player solves one half of the riddlegram, the other player has to solve the second half, and they can't confer. For each riddle they solve, the two split $100, and if they solve all 7 in 60 seconds or less, then they win $5,000. And unfortunately, the bonus round really isn't needed here. It just felt tacked on. And like I said before, this whole format of the common phrases and other words just never really worked. It's an interesting idea, but it gets old quickly. So unfortunately, Jackpot in this format never made it on the air. Although apparently in Wales they used a very similar format for their version. But the history of Jackpot lived on, because only about a year later, it would come to Canada.
Ladies and gentlemen, every one of these 15 players is holding a different riddle, but one of them is holding a secret jackpot riddle that could be worth thousands of dollars. Who can it be? At any moment, someone in the game is going to stand up and say, Jackpot! Now, here's your host, Mike Power.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Ken. Hi, welcome to Jackpot, our challenging game of riddles and rhymes with our 16 players who'll be with us all this week, trying for big cash and prizes. So why don't you play along at home, have some fun with us as well.
And now the part of this show that I think a lot of you are waiting for, the Canadian version of Jackpot. This version would run from 1985 to 1988 on Global Television, as well as the USA Network, where it became part of a popular game show block, along with Chain Reaction and Bumper Stumpers, both of which were also produced in Canada. Jackpot in this era was produced at the Global Studios in Toronto, and was hosted by Mike Darrow. Jeff Edwards was unable to return, as he was already busy with Chain Reaction, as well as California Lottery's Big Spin. And besides that, he didn't fit the CanCon quotas. Mike Darrow did, as he was actually born in Canada, and did do some radio work and television in Toronto. For this version of the show, they went back to what worked before, going back to the riddles and having the target number. However, this time the super jackpot would not have anything to do with the target number per se, and that the multiplier was taken out, and it would just be a random cash prize between $4,000 and $9,900. Hey, it's Canadian TV. It's going to be cheaper than the US. That's why Bob Stewart started producing some shows in Canada. But there were, besides the cheapness though, there were a few wrinkles that helped stretch the budget and make it look a little less cheap. For instance, there were bonus riddles offered that would give the King or Queen of the Hill a prize if they won it. A return trip, which, if solved correctly, would give the King or Queen of the Hill and the Riddler a chance to return on the following week's worth of shows. Any player who solved all 15 riddles in one game would win a new car. And if the jackpot riddle was not found until the very end, a $1,000 bonus was added to the jackpot. And most noticeably was the $10,000 Riddler contest. Scores were kept track of, and whoever answered the most riddles during their stay on the show over a given period of time would win a $10,000 cash prize. If 2 more players tied, then the players would split the money. Typically, this was offered every 10 weeks. And it worked pretty well. Yeah, it was cheaper than the original Jackpot, so it wasn't quite as exciting. But everything about it gelled well. Mike Darrow, although he wasn't as good as Jeff Edwards, did a decent job hosting the show. The riddles, some were clever, some were tacky, just like the original. The new theme music fit the show well, and that's why it was brought back in the next version of the show. And it showed that the format can work when you don't tinker with it too much. And a 3-year run is pretty respectable, especially in Canadian television, where Jackpot would be revived one more time in 1989, with Jeff Edwards returning as host. It aired in syndication and now offered a grand prize of $25,000. The format would have pretty much followed the Canadian version. The only really big difference was now you had to get the riddle right in order to add the money to the jackpot, which I have no problem with, and I think that's the way it should have been from the beginning. But unfortunately, the distribution company that was handling the show went bankrupt, so it only got to 1 year, and they were already in financial trouble by the time the show was in production. So it was just a rush production, and Cindy can tell you all the details in the video that she already did about that one. And it's a real shame that that's the last time we've seen Jackpot. It seems like this is a cursed show in the United States. And it's too bad. It's a very solid format that is due for a revival. Case in point, that the format works so well, Hollywood Showdown on GSN, which was another Bob Stewart creation, has a lot of elements, or had a lot of elements of Jackpot in it. And many people consider it to be one of GSN's best originals. Unfortunately, it only got a 2-season run, but it introduced us to one of the better hosts of our generation, that's Todd Newton. And as far as I'm concerned, Jackpot is long overdue for a revival. I doubt it's going to happen, but it would be nice to see a show with that unique aspect of riddles instead of questions, because it's something I don't think any other show has done. So let me know what you think down in the comments below if you'd like to see Jackpot revived. And if you like what you saw, hit the like button, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you'll know whenever we post a new video here on Game Show Garbage. And also, if you feel the need to, you can donate to our Patreon and help us produce more content. Until next time, this is Marc Power saying long may your big jib draw.